Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Thanks so much for tuning in today on this beautiful sunny day. Excuse any noise you might hear, like birds chirping, lawns being mowed, dogs barking. I feel like everyone is outside and trying to soak up as much sun as possible. There go the dogs. Anyways, today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of February, so my February wrap up. I read a lot of good books this month, so I'm excited to talk about a few of them. Without further ado, let's get started. The first book that I read and finished in the month of February is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This was the February book pick for Books and Lala's Literally Dead book club, which is a thriller horror book club. I don't read a lot of horror books, but I do pick up a few thrillers here and there, and this one sounded really interesting and was circulating around BookTube. This book is set in New York, and it's kind of a satirical, exaggerated take on gentrification, and I found it absolutely interesting. It was a very similar experience as watching Get Out, the movie was. Very mind-boggling, kind of like, what the heck is happening? And there's some twists and turns, and it was really intense. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. A big content warning for like language and some like goriness, and also there was like a really steamy scene in there, so if you're avoiding those things, maybe don't pick this one up. But for me, I really enjoyed it and found it absolutely interesting and kind of mind-bending, and also really informative. At the backstory of this book gives a lot of history to gentrification and the Black communities in New York, specifically Brooklyn, and I thought it was very interesting and well done, and yeah, I like this one a lot. The next book that I finished in the month of February was A Promised Land by Barack Obama. I started this book in December as an audiobook, and it is so long that I ran out of time from Libby to finish it, so I got it again in February and finished it. It was great. It was long. I gave it 4 stars because I did still really enjoy it, and I feel like I learned a lot, and Barack Obama's narration is great. However, I kind of went into this thinking that it was going to be maybe a little bit like Becoming by Michelle Obama, which was a fantastic audiobook. This, on the other hand, is a lot more heavy, like politics-based and political verbiage that was kind of over my head and just more than I can fully understand. I'm assuming that if I was looking more for a memoir, Barack Obama's earlier books, like Dreams of My Father or Dreams to My Father, would be a better pick. But this book dives into his first 4 years as president, just all the different like political and social things that were going on, and also in the midst of the recession and the war in Afghanistan and just all the craziness. So it was still really interesting, and I think he's an incredible speaker and author and narrator. I enjoyed it, but I would still recommend Becoming over this one. Next book that I picked up and finished was Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. This book fulfilled the prompt of reading a book with a color in the title, which is Books and Lala's Buzzwordathon throughout the year. I talked about it in my Buzzwordathon video, but this book is a nonfiction sort of autobiography memoir written from Jacqueline Woodson's childhood, so it's written as a children's book. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and I listened to the audiobook that Jacqueline Woodson narrated herself, so she told her own story. And in general, the chapters in this book are written kind of like as vignette, short little, almost in verse. Some of them are quite poetic, so it was really easy to get through, and yeah, I enjoyed this one a lot and would recommend it. I guess I didn't really describe it, but it follows Jacqueline Woodson's story growing up post-1960s civil rights era in Ohio and the South and in New York, and follows her family and her siblings and her mom and dad and all of the different relationships there, and written from this child's perspective of growing up in that time. So it was well done. Next, I read and finished Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This fulfills the prompt to read a book with red on the cover from Chantel's Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. This book has been on my shelf for a little while. I never read Fahrenheit 451 in high school and decided to pick it up this month, and I actually really enjoyed this one. I gave it 3 stars, maybe 3.5. I did really enjoy it, and the concept was fascinating to me. I think I just had a little bit of trouble with the writing, which was kind of hard for me to wrap my mind around and dive into. I feel like I wanted this book to be longer, for the characters to have more depth, and just for the story to be a little bit more extensive, because I kind of felt like it just jumped around from like just the next scene and the next scene, and stuff wasn't as explained as fully as I would have liked it to be. But overall, I found this book very interesting. If you don't know, this book is a classic that was written in the 50s, and it was portraying creating a dystopian future where everyone is kind of obsessed with technology and sucked into their TV screens and don't really have social lives. They don't really communicate. All books are banned, and really like knowledge in general and learning is frowned upon, and books are actually illegal. So there is these firemen who go around burning books and burning people's houses down if you are discovered to have a book in your house. And this follows one of those firemen. That's his profession. He's kind of going through the motions. He has a crummy marriage. He isn't really happy or fulfilled. And then he decides to pick up a book and read it and keep it. And he has this enlightenment, and the story continues from there. I'm glad I read it. I just wish there was a little bit more. But I can imagine reading this in the 50s when it came out was probably completely mind-blowing. There's a lot of credit due to this author who was able to envision in the 50s how much the digital world would impact our lives. I mean, we are living in the digital revolution and like the digital addiction era, so I feel like he wrote it brilliantly. And yeah, anyways, found this one very fascinating. Next up, my first 5-star read of the year, officially, because I gave a few children's books 5 stars in January, but this was the first official adult 5-star read of the year, and that is Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption by Bryan Stevenson. This book was incredible, absolutely impactful. I'll be thinking about this one for a long time. I had watched the movie earlier in 2020 and absolutely loved it, so the movie adaptation of this book is incredible as well. I would highly recommend reading and watching both. Bryan Stevenson is a lawyer, and he has done and is doing a lot of incredible work in the criminal justice system, primarily around people on death row and also juveniles who have been sentenced to life in prison for minor crimes or for crimes when they were basically kids. And this book follows several of those cases. The main case, though, was Walter McMillan, who was wrongfully accused of murder and put on death row in Alabama in the late 1980s, and it follows that whole story and that whole case. This book really infuriated like my soul, and reading about the injustice of our justice system here in America was kind of unbelievable and incredible. And yeah, this book is a 5 out of 5 and is one of those that will stick with me for a long time and that I will be recommending to every single person in my near vicinity. It is so good and heartbreaking. Highly recommend. Next up, I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is one of the 12 fiction books that I wanted to read in 2021. With February being Black History Month, I really wanted to prioritize stories and books by Black authors, so I wanted to pick this one up this month, and I'm glad I did. I listened to this one, and it's a great audiobook. I gave it 4 stars. This is a young adult fiction story following a teenage girl, but basically one of her best friends gets shot by the cops, and she was there to witness it in the car, and it follows all of the emotional ramifications from that. And in general, it gives a really interesting glimpse into the Black communities and the Black gangs in New York and those different relationships. And although this is a fictional story, I feel like I got a lot from it and really enjoyed listening to it. The last 2 books of the month I have were picked up because of Historathon, which was a month-long historical fiction readathon. I didn't do that great in fulfilling all the prompts, but I did read 2 books that fulfilled few of the prompts. The first book that I finished reading is The Yellow Bird Sings by Jennifer Rosner. This was the group pick for the readathon, so everyone kind of read this book together. And this is a historical fiction set during World War II, set in Poland, about a mother and a daughter who are hiding in the barn rafters and basically are living in this barn in like disgust, and how they have to be separated and basically lose each other. But the child of this lady is really gifted in music, and so there's a little bit of that storyline through it. I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars because there just wasn't enough character depth for me to make me care about these characters and what they were going through. I also found this just hard to listen to and annoying too. There's a lot of like trigger warnings here about sexual abuse. This main lady living in this barn was just being raped over and over and over again by the guy who owned the barn, but then also she sort of started liking it halfway through, and it was just weird. And I mean, it's probably not uncommon that there were women who were sexually abused during World War II and gave up their bodies for survival. I understand that, but I just didn't think it was well written in this book or well told. And yeah, there just wasn't enough depth for me for the relationships that were formed in this book either. It just was too fast, too short, skipped around too long, and I didn't really enjoy it. And finally, I have Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. This book fulfilled a few prompts. No people on the cover, a multi-generational story written by a diverse author. I think that's all the prompts that it fulfilled for that, but I still didn't get a few of them, but that's fine. Like I said, this book is a multi-generational story. It follows two half-sisters who are both born in Ghana in the 1700s, and one gets married off to a white British man involved in the slave trade, and the other one actually gets sold as a slave to America. It follows their stories and then their children's stories and their children's children's stories. This book covers about 300 years and ends around present day. But I gave this book 4 stars, maybe a 4.25. I really enjoyed it. I found it beautifully written. I enjoyed a lot of history and context I got from it. I know some people don't like the breakup because basically every single chapter in this book is a story on its own, and it's that person's little life story. And there's a little bit of connection from the previous story because it's the other person's child, but it jumps usually like 50 years from each generation. So they're a little bit broken up in that way that you can't fully follow along. There is a family tree in the beginning of this book, and I had to look at this every single time I started a new chapter to make sure I knew which family line I was following and who this person was a child of. So there's a little bit of that brought it down for me, only because I got attached to the characters in the beginning of the book and I wanted to learn more about them, but then it kind of cuts them off and starts a new story. But overall, beautifully told, beautifully written, would recommend. Overall though, a great reading month. I really enjoyed prioritizing books by Black authors, and in March I'm really excited to prioritize books about women's history and by women's authors. I made a video about the books that I'm hoping to pick up in March. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. This year's flying by quickly. Enjoy the sunshine if you have any where you live. I'm gonna end this video and go outside so that I can soak up all the sun. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in another video soon. Bye!